church congregation. I'm here today to introduce our speaker for this afternoon. I'm not going to insult you by reading the bios that have been passed out to each and every one of you. But I would like to say I have been fortunate to be able to work with this young lady since 2009. And I found that she is a person that is very pure, and she's given her heart to the community, not just the community, the black community in general. I would like for you to join with me as I introduce her with a round of applause, Ms. Genesis Steele.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is truly an honor and a pleasure to be with you today.
Amen.
First, before I go, I want to make sure I give praise where praise is due. So I'd like to first of all praise God.
Amen.
Because if it was not for Him, I would not be here today.
Wow.
I've been battling a little bit of a cold, so I hope you all bear with me. As I'm still with me, but I'm trying to kick it to the curb. I would also like to thank Pine Lawn Glen Baptist Church for having me here today. I'd like to thank Mr. Isadore for extending an invitation on behalf of Pine Lawn Glen Baptist Church. As I said before, it's truly an honor and a pleasure for me to join you here today as we come together to celebrate the life and legacy of such an amazing man, leader, servant, father, minister, husband, son, and friend. I'm truly a believer that today is a day on rather than a day off.
All right.
And it's imperative for me to be here to join you to honor such a great man. In my brief appearance today, I did not come here to teach or preach or speak, but rather to encourage us to begin to engage in a conversation which is needed in the success of our community.
All right.
After arriving in St. Louis about 6 years ago, I had so many questions. I'm originally a native of Seattle, Washington, the West Coast, and it's a completely different life, a different way of thinking out there. And so I had so many questions. How can I help the community? How can I use the blessings that I have to be an impact and to be a driving force and to improve things? How can I learn as much as I can from my coworkers, from my neighbors, from my friends? And on this quest for knowledge, I've had a chance to learn so much. And one of those opportunities that has really taught me a lot was an opportunity that I took in August of 2013. I got a phone call from some great people that I volunteered with at the Urban League, and they invited me to come along with them to the March on Washington. And as you can tell, I'm a little young, so I didn't get a chance to see the original March on Washington as it happened in 1963. So when I received that opportunity and that call, I was overjoyed because I thought, man, what a tremendous experience it will be able to follow in the footsteps. My grandparents were born in the South. One was born in 1927, the other was born in 1935. And they lived through much of the segregation, the hatred, the discrimination. And that is something that I will always be immensely indebted to them for doing that, but also to create an opportunity for me. Because they raised me, I knew that a lot of those things they didn't talk about because there was a lot of hurt that were associated with that, but there was a lot of joy in knowing that we have come so far. And so when an opportunity came for me to get on the bus and to be able to go and pay tribute and homage to those that stood before us, those that fought for us, those that gave their lives so we could have some of the amenities and some of the opportunities that we had today, I knew hands down that that was not an opportunity I could pass.
All right.
So it was one dark evening from downtown St. Louis, myself and about 50 others from the city. We all got on the bus. And we didn't know what we were going to get into. There was excitement, there was apprehension, there was nervousness because we didn't know what it was going to be like. On the bus with 50 people that you really don't know. And usually nowadays, all your relationships are through social media. So if you don't Facebook somebody or tweet somebody, you're not really having a good conversation. So we got on the bus, and it was about a 17-hour ride from St. Louis to Washington, D.C., but it was so tremendous. The conversations that were had, the lessons that we were learned, the things that some of the people on the bus imparted. We had people that were as young as 70, as young as 8. We had people that represented all different industries and walks of life. And everyone had a chance to go to the front of the bus and to share their stories about the movement, about what they remembered about Dr. King, about how important it is for us to not be bystanders in this thing called life. When we arrived, we had a chance to check into our hotel and get settled, but the day following was going to be the day where the majority of the action happened. We got up bright and early because as a young professional through the Urban League, it was our job to volunteer and to make sure things were set and ready to go. We were up at 4 o'clock in the morning. You could tell that there was an energy in the air. People were excited. You know, this was history. Even though it was 50 years later, it was still history for so many people. There were people who had never marched before in their life. This was their first time. There were people that were there that they had marched in 1963. And you saw so many people from so many different corners of the United States come together to march in honor of Dr. King and in honor of the Civil Rights Movement. You see, I knew it was real that morning when I was standing downstairs, and as I was standing in front of one of the doors to one of the rooms, we were going to have a big, huge meeting at Jesse Jackson walked right past me. And I was like, whoa, this is really real now. He's here. I knew it was real when I saw Martin Orial, the leader for the Urban League. He was there, and he was ready to go back. And there were so many others. And we left the hotel, we marched down the street, and it almost seemed like we were just carried by the wind, but next thing you know, we were on the mall. And we were looking around, and the mall was full. It may not have been as full as it was in 1963, but it was still full. We were sitting towards the front, and we could look all the way in the back, and we could see nothing but seas of people. People from different fraternities, from different industries, black, white, brown, Asian, everyone was there. And they were all because of one man who dared to have a dream. And it was beautiful. As I sat on the mall surrounded by thousands and thousands of people, I wondered, what must it have been like 50 years ago? 50 years ago when doing something like this was provocative. Doing something like this during such a tumultuous time was risky. You risked your life. You know, you didn't know who was on your side, who was for you, and who was against you sometimes. But they also knew that doing something like this was necessary. Right. It was necessary for us to have equality. It was necessary for us to have justice. It was necessary for us to have just that peace of mind at night that you could go home knowing that you had an equal opportunity to have a job. They knew that marching at the mall was necessary. Seeing so many people come together to commemorate such a moment was magnificent. And I believe it's something that Dr. King would have wanted all of us to do. I had a chance at one point in time while sitting on the mall listening to all the different speakers and the musicians sing their songs. I had a chance to sit next to or stand next to two of the most prolific leaders in St. Louis. And on one side I had Mr. James Buford. On the other side I had Mr. Michael McMillan. And to hear the stories that they told, to hear Mr. Buford talk about why it was so important that he served the Urban League for as long as he did to help the people of the St. Louis community, to give everyone such an opportunity is a life lesson that I will never forget. Because once again, I was on the mission to learn from each of these people that I came in contact with. I had a chance to talk to people from Washington, D.C., from New York City, to find out what it is that their communities are going through. How do they see the struggle? What do they envision things happening, and how would they like to see change? And it was so enlightening. I had a chance to talk to young people as young as 8 years old and ask them the same questions, and to hear about what they think their community should be and what they want to look like when they grow up, when they become older. It was just so humbling. Hearing the speakers from the National speak in remembrance of Dr. King was also very inspiring. And then I wondered to myself, what would Dr. King and the others who fought side by side with him, what would they say 50 years later. And I was reminded by something one of my students always tells me, and this is what he says. He always says, "Miss Steele, you know the struggle is real." My question to you today is, if the struggle is real, what are we going to do about it? Prompted by Mahalia Jackson, Dr. King delivered what we come to know now as his "I Have a Dream" speech. In reflection of the speech 50 years later, this is what I think he would want us to do. I think he would want the sleeper in each of us to awaken. Dr. King was keenly aware of the state of Black America, and so we must be too. He said in his "I Have a Dream" speech, the Negro is not free, and that the life of the Negro is sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation and discrimination. 100 years later, the Negro lives on a lonely island of poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. See, he knew what was going on because not only did he live it, but he listened to the stories of others that he chose to serve in the community. So my question to you is, what do you see? What do you hear? Well, 50 years later, the March on Washington, we as a people have taken great strides, but there's so much more to be done. Well, we have a thriving Black middle class, educational opportunities that appear endless. We can travel anywhere we want, dine at any establishment that we want. We still have issues that still linger within our community. Many of our children are still underperforming in schools and are dropping out. Yes. Approximately 39% of our African American males are entering college. And of those 39%, only 34 to 36% of those males are graduating from college. These degrees are necessary. Within the next 8 years, 80% of all jobs are going to require higher education of some sort. And we need these men to be represented at the table. We still have racial profiling and a ridiculously high rate of incarceration of African Americans across this country. This still continues to be an issue. We are still battling for equal access to health care and voting rights. Jobs still continue to be an issue as well as employment. During the recession, it was said that while America catches a cold, African Americans catch the flu. Meaning that while we all suffer through the recession together, it's primarily us who are hit worse with unemployment during this period. If you still don't believe me that there are issues that still have yet to be solved in our communities, take a look around. Look at our cities. Look at our surrounding areas. Why are there so many houses and homes in our neighborhoods that are boarded up, they're falling apart, as if it was a war zone? Talk to your neighbors. Hear their stories. In serving in high schools and college students for the past 6 years in the Ferguson-Florissant School District, I have learned so much from our young people. They've told me that children a lot of times join gangs not because they think it's the coolest thing to do, but because they felt as if no one cared for them, or they didn't have positive role models, or they didn't have opportunity. I have spoken to many of our youth that were kicked out of school because